Welcome to the DNA Dojo podcast.
All right, sir. Good morning, afternoon. It is the afternoon. Today, let's talk about habit forming, changing habits, doing habitary stuff. That's even a word. Because I recently just started making some changes to my habits, so I thought it'd be a little timely to discuss kind of some different things. And then obviously this relates to martial arts and the fact that you gotta have habits of training, or you're just gonna lose pretty much everything you've learned.
So you have to identify what you want to change, whether it's getting up earlier, whether it's drinking more water, so to speak. You just make that say, maybe I'm gonna drink 2 tumblers full of water every day, one in the morning and one in the night. If you write that down on your calendar and you make that your goal and you make it a habit, you think about it, you discipline yourself to do it. It's a small change, but that helps you condition yourself to make changes.
Yeah, I figured this was a timely topic because I was recently feeling like I was like, get out of bed, you're just like, going through the motions again. So I was listening to a couple different podcasts on some things, and I was just like, I'm gonna try and just change something. So, and I know like changing your mood's a really broad subject to try and tackle, but the one thing I did change and started making a habit was on my ride to and from work, I won't listen to music anymore. I'll either have a podcast or just like silence, which it sounds kind of psychotic and a little boring, which it is. But I definitely feel like that small change and like forming the habit of like forcing myself not to do that has now made my feel like it gave me more energy, kind of changed the angle of my outlook a little bit, which I thought was interesting. So I started taking that thought process of like, well, if I make a small change here, start changing some other small things and see how it goes. Because I always looked at like habit forming as like, like this huge task that you have to like do this, then that, then this, instead of just trying one small thing and seeing how it affects it and then just kind of building onto that.
No, that's a good way to do it. I think that recently I started listening to a lot of motivational podcasts or YouTube type of speeches. And I started getting up earlier. I started looking forward to that hour of power, maybe you can call it. And it started to motivate me and recharge the positive batteries. And that is driving me to do other things and to get up earlier, have more energy to go out and do things and to stay disciplined enough. I think that as Americans, the thing that we get caught up on is trying to go from 0 to 60 as fast as we can. And it's not about the speed of the growth. It's more about the quality of the growth. If we think of it like that, where we just learn or modify ourselves just a little bit, that little bit of change, even if it's just 1%, 0.5%, over time builds up into a larger degree of change that's more sustainable. If you try to change too many things at one time, it's not sustainable. You're going to burn out. That's just the way that it is. Look at how many people make changes in New Year's. Well, why wait to New Year? You have to wait till New Year because the gyms are going to be packed come January 1st or 2nd. They're going to be packed maybe till February. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to start to see a fall off in like March and April, where a lot of people are just going to lose the discipline or the gumption to go and to work out. So start now. Start with smaller things and divide it up. Make it manageable.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, in class, like in learning, my coach would always say like, you see a move and then so basically the way I get taught is they show a whole move and then you try and do it and then he goes, okay, clearly that's not working. So I think he almost does that on purpose now to like try the move and then see where everyone kind of has little hangups. And then he will say, okay, so then he breaks it down like almost move by move. So it's interesting to see how it scales between that and like larger goals and things like that. Of you, it it sounds so obvious when you put it into words, really, but just having the ability to break it down to almost like a granular level of, all right, if you do this, then move to step two. Don't try to, as an analogy, I forget who said this, but they're like, if you sit out to eat a cake, you don't just sit there and shove the whole cake into your face. You cut it up into pieces and eat it as a piece. You don't just smash your face into the cake. So it kind of makes sense to break, again, sounds ridiculously obvious when you say it, but like break it down into very granular tasks that you can comprehend and figure out and complete, and then move to the next one instead of trying to, like, you don't set out to run a marathon, you run a mile 26 times essentially.
I think that that equates to how I teach anyway.
Yeah.
Is I will say if you take an overhead club technique. So how I'll break that down is the first thing I'll do is I'll have everybody step forward with their left foot. That's the first thing that you need to be able to do is to move forward. So I'll have them do that 10 times. Let's step forward with your left foot 10 times. And then what we'll add next to that is we'll do the X block that's blocking the arm. So we'll put the footwork together with the X block. So now you do that 10 times and you're just building on that habit and trying to create that quality. So what's the third step is now we step in, we do the X block. Now we redirect the hand into the person's groin. And then we'll do that 10 times. So you can see you just start building it up and it makes it easier to comprehend and to learn the different skills that it takes to do that technique. So, and just to finish off the technique, then we would go and add the strikes. So we'd step in with the left foot, we'd throw an X block, we redirect the hand to the person's groin, then we throw a left hand shot to the body, and then a right hand shot to the head. Now, if you break it down like that, it's like, wow, you can remember that now.
Right.
Because you can even visualize exactly what I was teaching it, like I was in the same room with you. Most people would definitely be able to go, okay, maybe somebody's going to ask, well, what's an X block and how do you redirect? But they have a basic concept of how that technique is to defend against an overhead club.
Yeah, it's so funny sitting here listening to this, and I'm just like, all this, like even last night, my coach said an analogy to one of the new guys. He was basically saying, like, asked him if he played sports. He goes, "Okay, I played lacrosse." He's like, "Neat." My coach was a hockey player, and he's like, and it's just all this stuff going. It's weird that it's like basic learning. It just sounds so obvious when you say it. But he was saying, okay, when you go to play hockey, you go, well, you got to learn how to play offense. You got to learn how to play defense. You got to learn how to do plays. You got to learn how to do this, that, the other thing. And he goes, okay, all that is irrelevant if you can't skate. And that's like basic learning. You got to learn one before you can learn two. And you don't want to jump ahead of yourself. So it's like, even just going back when I'm like, this is almost as dumb as learning basic math, like setting these little, it's just weird. I guess I've never put it to words of how simple this stuff sounds of building a goal. And I guess I'm just having an epiphany right now at this point where I'm like, if you want to set yourself up for success, you have to break it down into manageable levels. Same thing with like setting habits. Don't say, hey, I'm going to get up at 3 a.m. every morning, because you'll probably get up once and hate it. You got to get up at, 6 a.m., get up at 5:30, get up at 5, and just kind of keep getting and building yourself up. And then eventually you might say, hey, I don't need to get up at 3, getting up at 4:30 is fine. And you have that habit already built where you're getting up consistently earlier, as an example. It just seems so like dumb simple to me right now that this is what we're talking about. I just never really put it into, and even for like goal forming, it is something that's like this granular as well. It's just kind of epiphany.
Well, I think that what you have to have is you have to have that the overall goal. You know what where I want to go from point A to B, but
Right.
then you have to look at, well, what are the steps to go from point A to B? Because it's not just going from point A to B. It's like, what can I control today to create the future for tomorrow? That's the question that you have to ask. And then you break it into small things and you go, okay, well, maybe I want to be an actor, but I don't know anything about acting. But to be an actor, then you need to know how to read a script and emote the script. So first thing is you have to be able to read correctly. I mean, you need to be able to interpret the words at some point. Maybe this is not the best of analogies, but let's say take it to a gym. Like you can't just go in the gym and blast out a workout and go as heavy as you can the first day in the gym because you're gonna get injured. B, you're gonna be so sore you're not gonna be able to go back. Then in 2 days you're gonna go, shit, I'm not going back in there. Like I'm like sore as hell. Well, you can't do
Yes.
that. You gotta work it out into segments. So what happens in gym workouts? We go in there, we do some basic workouts to get a basic level of conditioning.
Hmm.
And then as we move forward, then we change the either the frequency of the workout, we change the amount of weight that we're going to push, or we're going to change the amount of reps that we're going to do to build up your muscles, your tendons, all the supporting muscles to get that feel of what the muscle feels like when you work it out and work through all those early stages of lactic acid and how you got to rebalance your body. You have to make those changes that way.
Yeah, that's a good point that you brought up there because you have to leave room for adjustments. I think that's something I don't do very often is I'll set a goal and I'll say, I'm setting out to accomplish X, Y, and Z, and then I literally just go from A to B and I don't account for things that's like, oh, well, what if this happens or what if that happens? Then you have to figure out a way to work that back into the plan, and that's definitely something I need to work on because like a lot of times you go, okay, I set out to do this. You start doing it, a wrench gets thrown in the plan, and then you're kind of just like, well, I guess I'll just give up, or like if it's that drastic of something where you're just like, I won't do it anymore, or it puts enough of a wrench in there where you're like, oh, well, I'll just give it another week or another 2 weeks before I try and do this thing, whatever the case is, and that's something you have to, I think, actively accounting for that, or just leaving a little bit of room for error, so to speak, is more valuable than just being like, oh, everything's going to go according to plan. Nothing's going to happen that could possibly throw me off my route here.
Well, that's a little bit myopic to look at it that way. If you're looking at if you make small goals, then you can make small adjustments as you go because you're constantly learning to do that. Now, as far as like motivating yourself to go out there and have the discipline to do it, you just have to do it. Make the small changes. You get out of bed. Maybe you don't eat. It's like fasting. When you learn, I don't know how many people are into fasting at this point. It's pretty popular, but you don't start out doing a 24-hour fast.
Right.
You start out by stopping eating at a certain time every day, and then you stretch that out. So maybe you go, okay, well, I'm gonna stop eating at 10 o'clock at night or something, which is pretty late. And then you start ratcheting that back to, I'm going to stop eating at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. And then you eat your next meal at breakfast. And then eventually you start pushing that breakfast meal out until eventually you're eating dinner and then you're eating lunch the next day. And then you start pushing lunch out to get comfortable, see how your body feels.
Right.
And then you push that out to, okay, I'm going to eat dinner the night before, and then I'm not going to eat until dinner the next day. But you have to get that stretch.
Right.
I mean, it's just like stretching. If you haven't been active in something, the bodies just aren't flexible on their own. As you get older, you lose that flexibility. So
Right.
you're constantly spending more time stretching yourself. Motivation's the same way. It's just a muscle you have to flex. You have to work on it. You have to read positive things. You need to listen to positive speeches. You need to be around positive people.
Hmm.
I have a simple philosophy. You know, I made the observation a long time ago that people need a list of things to happen to have a great day, but only one thing to go wrong to have a shit day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? Why does it have to be that way? It doesn't. Why don't you pick one positive thing in your day and let that fuel your whole day? And that's how I try to live that way. I try to find one positive thing every morning. Maybe it's as simple as getting out of bed. Maybe as simple as putting my sneakers on, going out, getting that mile or 2 miles in on a walk, something. Maybe it's just appreciating what I have and being grateful and having gratitude for the things in my life. Those are just simple things that build up that energy.
Yeah, it's good you brought that up because actually, by you saying that, I know we've talked about that before, but now I currently have a very specific instance in my life that I can apply that to someone that I know that I would probably tell them that and see if it would help. But I just noticed everything else removed. I notice it does seem like a lot of people these days are like very, I don't feel like getting out of bed. I don't want to do this. I hate doing that, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, I don't know if I was just raised different or if it's from a sports background or what, but I have I have my circle of friends groups that are all kind of the same way I am, where it's like, hey, like I know it sucks, but you got to get up and do it. Like the more you do it, the more you get up. Hey, going to work sucks, but you get up and do it anyway, and it is what it is. And then you just look for the better parts of the day. Hey, I get to go home. Hey, I go to the gym. I work out. I hang out with the boys. Whatever the case is, it's like. But I know a lot of people that are just like, oh man, like I hate getting out of bed to go to work, but I do it because I need the money. But then I just go home and go to bed because it sucks. And I'm like, it's just like I don't understand. Maybe it's just a completely different mindset, but I'm like that just seems so. I mean, depressing is kind of the right word, but it's just like you need to find something to motivate yourself. Like set a goal for yourself to do something to get the ball rolling, because it just seems like a lot of people are very much okay with just sitting in a very stagnant position, not getting that ball rolling at all. Just like I don't understand. I'm sure there's a lot more scientific to that of like all that stuff, but just basically what you just said of like find one positive thing, just one is all you need, and then just ride that out for the rest of the day. Like you said, getting out of bed. Because I know some people are like, man, like some days I just can't get out of bed and this and that. And I'm like, dude, just get out of bed.
Well,
Just
I
force
think,
yourself to get out of bed.
yeah, I think what part of that too is the verbiage that you use with yourself. If you say that
Yeah.
it's hard, or I just can't, I mean, those are words you just don't use them.
Yeah.
I always tell people, it's like, look, it's not, yes, you can say it's hard, but I'd rather say it's a challenge. It's
Hmm.
challenging. Because why? Because a challenge you can overcome.
Right.
You know, you can, it gives you hope that, okay, if it's a challenge, I'm going to meet that challenge. Maybe I'm different. Maybe I'm wired different. I don't know. But challenging to me means I can overcome it. If it's hard, like trying to run through a brick wall or something, then you have to go, well, maybe I don't want to do that.
Right.
Because you're definitely seeing that. Like, oh, it's just so hard. But it's not. If you change your perspective and take hard or difficult and say challenging, then it makes it so you can work through it. And I think that's important. I also taken out the word hate out of my vocabulary.
Yeah.
I don't use that. I learned that from being a parent. My son used to say, "I hate that. I hate this." And I'm like, "Why don't we change that word? Why don't we change it to I dislike that or I dislike this?" Because then I think that you're more open.
Right. Yeah, like I definitely relate to that. I hate wasn't a word I used a lot, but I definitely used, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. My mom would always just be like, "Don't say that." And then I was eventually stopped saying it. And I was like, "Oh, it turns out this stuff's pretty easy." But yeah, like hate, I try to, if I'm going to use the word hate, I make sure that I'm like it applies to that. Like I hate drunk driving, something like that where you're like it very much makes sense. But yeah, if you throw it kind of like loses the value of the word when you just throw it on everything. It just gives everything a negative connotation. So it's definitely one of those. But one of the other ones I've noticed I've tried to change, if applicable, of course, is instead of saying if, I try to say when, because if
Right.
implies failure and when is implying that it's gonna happen. I can't tell you when, but it's gonna happen.
No, that's exactly correct. The verbiage that we speak to ourselves definitely determines our destiny. It was said to me, and I think that this is an old adage somewhere, that if you feel you can or you can't, you are right.
Yeah,
If you feel you can't do it, you're not going to do it. If you feel you can do it, you will do it.
right.
You will find that way. I've applied myself. I've watched hundreds of students come and go from teaching martial arts, and you have students that will make excuses. Oh,
Hmm.
I can't come today. I got a paper cut. I can't come today, or this or that. And it's just something stupid. I stubbed my toe.
Yeah,
I can't come today.
right.
But then you have those people that have a busy life, and they will find a reason to go. If it's
Yeah,
important to you, you will find a way to do it. And that's plain and simple. And that's another thing too, about training in martial arts and earning your black belt is you have to have a certain amount of discipline and drive to get that black belt. Not everybody can do it. I mean, yes, you can have some physical limitations, but you can work around that. But
right.
mentally, you need to be in a headspace that goes, I can do this and I will do it, and nothing will stop me from doing it. And that, I think, reverberates on a warrior mentality, not just in martial arts, but also in business and sports and other things. If you set your mind to it, you can do it. No one's going to stop you from doing it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest like lessons you can take away from doing a martial or just a physical activity in general almost is just it kind of engraves in the brain of like, hey, you can do it. You're mentally tough enough to do whatever you want. One of the quotes I used to live by when I was wrestling was Dan Gable said, "Once you wrestle, everything else is easy," and it's kind of true. Like if you can get your head smashed into the ground for 6 minutes straight and come out and be like, I feel good. Like it's not like I'm like feel defeated. Then everything else is easy. At no point in time are you probably going to be in as much anguish as you are as wrestling or in jujitsu or getting punched in the face, something along those lines. So it definitely just once you do something like that, it makes your life it makes everything else in your life easier.
Well, what did the Marines say? That the only easy day was yesterday.
I don't think
I
I've
mean,
heard that one. That's a good
yeah,
one.
I mean that they say that all the time. The one that I really like is I have survived everything that has tried to kill me. Every day you've survived something that's tried to kill you,
Yeah.
and you continue to come back and bounce back. Now, I'm not sure whether that's from where I grew up, how I grew up. You know, it could be just embedded. And then when
Yeah.
you play sports and you're involved in that, and when you get into martial arts, there's a lot. I meet a lot of people that say I just can't, or I'm having a challenge or a difficulty or whatever it is, and you just have to overcome it. You have to learn to tell the body to shut the fuck up, and just nut up and go out there and do it.
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of that, like I do get people that come into the gym every now and they're like, "Oh, like," and it's there. I see two types of people. You see the people that come in and train once, they're like, "Man, you guys are really tough," yada yada. They kind of talk, and then you never see them again. And they're in shape. They kind of do. They seem like they're gonna stay, but they don't. But then you get the kids that are like not athletic whatsoever that come in and they say, "Hey, yeah, like I want to eventually do this. This is my goal, but I started coming here and I'm doing, I'll do the cardio class. I start running on the treadmill a little bit." They start kind of and going into is usually what I recommend to people who are like, "Hey, I never done this before. What do I do?" I say, "Hey, get your like you were saying earlier, get your body into shape. Start doing, you don't have to get crazy with it, but, start doing something, get your body moving, because truly jumping into something like jujitsu is very taxing right off the bat, like way more than you would think. But,
Well,
get
even
the
if you're a
body, get the
trained,
ball rolling.
even if you're a trained guy from another art,
Yeah.
it's a totally different. You're putting your body through things that it doesn't go through.
Yeah.
You could definitely see that, like the Shaolin Kempo stuff. You learn a new form, and you go, man, why am I so sore? It's like, well, you're learning a new form, and you're putting your body through moves it's not used to yet.
Right.
But once you've conditioned yourself to go through that movement, your body goes, hey, okay, cool. Like, why was this so challenging before? Because you're using muscles you never used before.
Right.
So, and that's why I think that they're in the beginning of jiu-jitsu, that you go through that. You get smashed because you don't know what you're doing and your body's trying to adjust, and you just have to let yourself go through the process and be part of the process and
Right.
learn how to deal with frustration and pain and discomfort. And most people don't want to go through discomfort to move
Right.
forward.
Yeah. And I think we had this discussion before, kind of just going back, way back. That kind of ties into when you're going to a gym and you're going to do that stuff. If you're going to start for the first time, that's why I'm a big advocate of either, if one of your friends does it, go with them, like go in a somewhat comfortable environment where the people are like, you're with people that've been through it, they know it, and they don't have an ego about it. So they let you know, like, hey, it's going to suck for the first few, but if you stick with it, you're going to learn how to have your balance. You're going to learn how to move this way and that way, and it's going to be a lot better for you. But if you go to a gym just cold turkey and no one's really friendly and they just smash you and then you leave, that sucks, and it will continue to feel like it sucks, and it feels like you won't be getting anywhere. So definitely, that's why I usually advocate for going somewhere that and then, try other gyms, but find somewhere that you like. Don't just go to the closest one, because it's that little side tangent. But
No, yeah, that is true. I mean, I know we have the discussion at some point about that, about choosing a great school or what art to start, which is a really good conversation. You have to be going open minded. If you're closed minded, then what are you going to learn? Nothing.
right.
There's a reason that we have two ears and one mouth. We need to listen twice as much as we talk. Because when you're talking, you're just regurgitating the knowledge that you've gained or your opinion. When you're listening, you're adding to your knowledge base.
Right.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny. A couple minutes ago when we were talking about just like changing small habits to motivate, and then what you were saying is people, make small excuses to not go to class, and I was kind of falling into that for a while. And so I drive an hour to get to the gym, so I drive an hour to get to the gym to have an hour long class. So it kind of like in my head starts to be like, all right, what, to start doing the math, you look at the gas prices and all that stuff that you can complain about. But was in the last week, I started changing some stuff of, hey, I'm gonna, like I said, not listen to music in the car. I'm going to try and not watch TV while I eat, sit and just relax and focus on eating, or, take time to do that, just change up small habits in the day. And the other day I was like, I need to go to the gym. Like I feel like I have that motivation back to, regardless of what's happening, like, oh, I got out at 6:05, I'll be a little bit late, going to the gym, don't care, I gotta go. And I feel like that was kind of like a breath of fresh air to finally kind of feel like I'm back on the horse again, of like, I want to go to the gym, I want to be there 2 times, like as much as I can. I usually end up going twice a week, so when I wouldn't go one of those 2 days, it'd be like a big stretch before I'm back in there. So I feel like I'm finally out of going through the motions and back into, I want to go and learn and start doing stuff at the gym again. So there's, when you brought that up a couple minutes ago, I was like, oh, that's I know that all too well.
Well, let's take a look at that though. You didn't change major things. You changed very small things.
Yeah.
Which then fuels itself. And it reverberates. It's just like I know I use this a lot in writing and in conversations. You take a pebble and you drop it into a pond.
Hmm.
Now that's going to create ripples out from where that pebble was dropped. And those ripples keep getting bigger and bigger as it radiates throughout the pond.
Right.
But it takes that one little piece of change and change of perspective that's going to give you the fuel to do other things. And that's what it's going to be. And for me, you know, since I'm not in a active dojo with a lot of people where I feed off of their energy and I give them my energy,
Hmm.
that I have to, because of moving into a different area, that I have to continue to be that beacon for myself and to bring that energy to other people by reading positive material, reading biographies, reading um, motivational things. There's some great books out there. Having a mantra maybe every day.
Yeah.
You know, I have certain personal ones I'm not going to share that I use that trigger me. And that's another thing too I want to talk about is creating an anchor. There's a lot of times that I would show students maybe that they would be anxious or nervous during a test.
Hmm.
So I would give them a little trigger, an anchor, and I would take them through a meditation. And it could be as simple as just a front position. Now, what's the most common thing front position is you're going to be making a fist with your right hand. You can make a fist anywhere. So why don't we think about, okay, I want you to think about how you felt the most confident in your life. And as you're doing that, I want you to squeeze that fist and I want you to anchor that feeling into that fist. Now we're going to take that feeling and we're going to magnify it by 10. And then how more intense it is that we're going to keep feeling more confident and more confident. Now we're going to times it by 100. Just feel how your body feels right now. Feel your head coming up, your chest coming up, your shoulders going back. You know, you have good body position, good posture. You can feel the energy just flowing through you.
Hmm.
Now, every time that you start a class, you got to start front position. So every time that you come to class, you go into front position and you got to put that fist, squeeze that fist. You keep adding to that energy over and over and over again. And when you keep anchoring that feeling to that physical, the physicality of making that fist, that energy starts to be like a switch. So
Yeah.
even if you're tired, you don't feel like being there, you're not focused. I know for myself that over the years, every time I go front position, I'm like, it switches a button. It's like kind of like Sylvester Stallone and like Over the Top. If anybody knows that movie, where he like takes his hat and he switches it backwards, like every time before he does the arm wrestling. It's
Yeah.
kind of like that. He talks about it like it's a switch and it comes on. And I'm even getting fired up just thinking about like going into a front position, like, all right, well, come on, sensei, like challenge me. Like I'm ready for whatever you're gonna bring on
Yeah.
this class. And I'm gonna give you 110%. I'm gonna give you everything I have for this hour. I'm gonna leave it in this dojo. And and you just keep anchoring that feeling and then you start carrying that out into the world.
Hmm.
That energy that you create in the dojo, you take with you. So, and a lot of times, especially at the end of class and the beginning of class, you go through salutations and meditations. And I'll tell students, I say that with your hard work and your sweat, and let's admit it, sometimes your blood, because you do bleed in the dojo when you're training right,
Yep.
that you add to the energy of the dojo and you add to the chi of the dojo and you add your own chi and you're gonna when you leave you're gonna take that energy with you and spread it to the rest of the world. And what is that? That's the pebble dropping into the pond.
Yep.
I mean, it's you're creating that energy. I think that sums it up pretty well.
Yeah. I was gonna say that's pretty good right there. That's That's a nice little cherry on top of that whole thing. Yeah, and like going the only other thing I would say is back to the habit forming or setting goals and stuff like that is that exact same thing that you just said about having the energy carries into, hey, if you start setting a goal for yourself and you achieve that little milestone, you get that. I mean, scientifically, you start getting that like dopamine response, and you're like, hey, I feel good. And you start carrying that energy, and it just kind of snowballs the exact same thing. You just start going out in the world, and you're like, hey, I feel fresh. I feel like I can take on the world now. Whatever you're doing, it just kind of carries over, and that's that pebble in the pond.
Yeah, there's a lot of good analogies that are out there, you know, especially about, you fall down, you got to get up and keep going. You just can't just fall down and quit.
Hmm.
I always say, um, I'm not going to fold like a cheap lawn chair. I don't know if people understand that nowadays. Maybe my generation is a little old, but there used to be these really crappy lawn chairs that were just made out of aluminum with crappy little, strands on it, and
Yeah.
they would break.
I mean, they're
So
basically like beach chairs now.
yeah, there's some beach chairs where you sit on and you break them in like 2 seconds.
Yep.
It's like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna take you. You're gonna knock me down. I'm gonna get up, and that's the mentality I have. You knock me down, you better knock me the fuck out. Is what you better do.
Yep.
Because if I can get up, I'm coming after you.
Yeah.
One way or another. I'm gonna overcome any obstacle in my way. And you know what? You're gonna fail. We fail every day. And failing is learning and experience.
Yep.
If you learn from something, you never fail. I mean, there's so many analogies of people that have failed over and over again, and they're the most successful people in the world.
I was gonna say, wasn't it Thomas Edison that said like I didn't fail at making the light bulb, I just found 1,000 ways that didn't work or something like that.
Yeah,
As,
that's one. And then like Colonel Sanders from
yeah,
Kentucky Fried Chicken, he tried to sell his recipe 10,000 times. 10,000 times. He's rejected that many times before he sold it. And now look at it. It's an industry.
yeah,
If you have the drive and the willpower to continue and modify your goals when you have to, go and learn, okay, well, this isn't working. That's the next thing. Failure is just figuring out what doesn't work.
yep,
That's the big thing. And you just got to fire your ass up. Like, I think too many people go out there and they try to find other things to fire them up. People like, oh, I'm not going to feel in love until someone loves me. Well, that's a bunch of bullshit. Because
yeah,
if you don't love yourself, no one's going to love you.
right,
You got to find something to love within yourself and build on that love and take care of yourself. And be unique, be your own individual. And then when you do find love, then it's just like, wow, this is an awesome experience because I love myself and I can love somebody else.
right,
And also too, I think the other thing that I look at is gratitude. Be grateful for what you have and share that gratitude with somebody else. You don't have to, if you go out there and do something for somebody out of the kindness of your heart, you don't have to tell people about it. Just
right.
have satisfaction that you went out there and you helped somebody.
Hmm.
And I always also say that if you want to accomplish a goal in your life, to go help somebody accomplish their goal. Because you're going to feed off that energy. That energy is going to be there.
Yeah.
And that selfless act and being grateful to be able to help somebody, that's going to help move you mountains.